This video is the fourth installment of a 7-part retrospective looking back on BBC Sherlock and TJLC. It is intended that you watch the entire series in order. There is an annotation in the top right to the playlist for A Better Story, so you can start at the beginning. So far in this retrospective, we've re-established the techniques of literary and film analysis used in a TJLC reading of BBC Sherlock, and have gone through Series 1, Series 2, and many happy returns to examine how that reading is supported by the text, and how, in many places, it doesn't make sense without it. But as I have said several times, the point of this retrospective isn't to prove that TJLC is correct, just that it's a reasonable way to view the show, and, in my mind, a better story than you'll find otherwise. We've also discussed how the show appears to exist to ask questions about Sherlock, John, their relationship, and ultimately, the true nature of the home stories. In the 4 episodes we're looking at today, that's more true than ever. And for the first time, it looks like the show is leading towards a particular answer for what this story is actually about. The contradictions and misdirects are still present, but the underlying truths become more and more obvious. At least, that's how it looks in the right lighting. You want to know how you can tell that Mark wrote this episode? It's the trains. The answer is the trains. You might not know this if you weren't in the fandom 9 years ago. God, 9 years ago. I have been here way too long. But the cultural impact the Reichenbach fall had was massive. The episode was critically acclaimed, still holding a 100% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes 10 years later. And it wasn't only popular with critics. After the episode aired, the internet was flooded for theories for how Sherlock might have survived his fall, and the hype around trying to solve that puzzle lasted for the entire 2-year hiatus. The Empty Hearse is essentially a response to that phenomenon. Most people pick up on that. Unlike most, I don't think it's being done to say that fans are wrong to care about the show, but perhaps to suggest that the fan base at the time was focusing on the wrong things.
And particularly with the Empty Hearse, when we worked out how he did it, we had no idea it was going to become such a vast talking point. And that absolutely meant that when we came to the solution, we had to acknowledge the fact that it would become a huge talking point. Yeah. Hence the fake theories. Because we're playing, again, not playing with the expectations of a tiny minority. We're playing with the expectations of 10 million people who were all desperate to know. So it would be very different if it was focused on some minority of hardcore fans, but everybody wanted to know, so that's what it was for.
The episode opens with Anderson's theory for how Sherlock survived. In broad strokes, Anderson is actually correct. Sherlock did survive, there was a body double, and Molly Hooper was in on the plan. It's only in the details where things start to get a bit off the rails.
And sleep.
Lestrade calls him out a bit. You could say he's standing in for a neutral observer, someone who knows Sherlock, likes him, but is far from obsessed.
2 years and the theories keep getting more stupid. How many more you got for me today?
This is not the first conversation that they're having about this. As we saw in many happy returns, Anderson just will not shut up about his Sherlock theories.
Do you honestly believe that if you have enough stupid theories, it's going to change what really happened?
I believe in Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, well, that won't bring him back.
Oh boy. We are not going near that one yet. Again, the mockery being directed at Anderson is softened by the fact that he is, in fact, correct. Sherlock is still alive, working tirelessly to dismantle Moriarty's network. We join him just as he's captured and tortured for information. And who is there watching on in silence but Mycroft himself?
Значи, мой приятелю, сацмо само те, да.
Sorry, but the holiday is over. Brother dear.
Sherlock will accuse Mycroft of enjoying his suffering, but Mycroft insists he had a different motivation.
Why didn't you intervene sooner?
I couldn't risk giving myself away, could I? Would have ruined everything.
Intentional or not, watching this show with Mycroft as a surrogate for the writers does add a lot of depth. The scene of Mycroft trying to get Sherlock to focus on a scheme that involves trains is intercut with John visiting Baker Street for the first time in years. He's clearly still not over Sherlock. Mrs. Hudson asks what made him come back after all this time, and before we even see her face, it's explicitly confirmed that John is using Mary to move on from Sherlock.
Well, I'm moving on.
So soon after Sherlock?
Well, yes.
You really have moved on, haven't you?
Mrs. Hudson, how many times Sherlock was not my boyfriend? I am not gay.
Nice little jump cut there. The episode is going to use that trick a lot. This is often dismissed as yet another gay joke. And yeah, maybe, but this is one of the people who knows John and Sherlock best saying this. It seems to add some weight to her assessment of the situation, as does the fact that Sherlock is completely uninterested in the terrorist plot. He only has one priority.
There's going to be a terrorist strike on London. A big one.
And what about John Watson?
Though he doesn't seem to like the new mustache much.
Well, we'll have to get rid of that.
We.
He looks ancient. I can't be seen to be wandering around with an old man.
A bit later, he rubs absent-mindedly at his top lip in a way that seems to hint at why it might be bothering him. Was he perhaps imagining what the mustache would feel like against his own lips? Another character will later complain about having to endure bristly kisses from John.
God, I know, 6 months of bristly kisses for me and then his nibs turns up.
Mycroft makes a half-hearted attempt to warn Sherlock that John has moved on, but the thing is, he's wrong. John has not moved on. He's literally stood in Baker Street at the exact moment that Mycroft says this.
Baker Street? He isn't there anymore. Why would he be? It's been 2 years. He's got on with his life.
Sherlock is undeterred, focused solely on reuniting with John. We properly meet Mary at this point, and right from the beginning, her character is a fascinating case study for what's going on with the show in general. Either you're meant to take her at face value, not question why she says and does what she does, or in light of the eventual revelation about who her character is, you're meant to question everything. Here, I'll be taking the latter approach.
Meeting you has been the best thing that could have possibly happened.
I agree.
What?
I agree, I'm the best thing that could have happened to you. Sorry.
Well, no, it's,
One of the major complaints lobbed at TJLC is that we don't like Mary just because she's getting in the way of the ship. I think that's an unfair criticism. In light of the reveal that she's a gun for hire, hiding her entire life from John because she knows he'd leave her if he knew the truth.
Because John can't ever know that I lied to him. It would break him and I would lose him forever. And Sherlock, I will never let that happen.
Her character has all these little moments that seem charming at first, but if you think about them too long, read as manipulation tactics. Now, one of the obvious counter-arguments to using this as evidence that she's a bad person is that Sherlock acts in very similar ways, which is true. But there are a couple of things to note about that. Mary is like Sherlock, and John is marrying her. In fact, he seems to like her specifically because she reminds him of Sherlock in some ways. What does that suggest? But more importantly, these comparisons are fairly surface level. You have to consider why both characters make the choices that they do. There is a fundamental difference in their motivations, and that's made increasingly clear as the series progresses. For now, Sherlock and Mary are presented as more alike than different. Sherlock reveals he's alive with a joke, and when John reacts poorly, tries to use humor to dispel the situation. It doesn't work, at least not on John. Mary seems at least a little amused.
Are you really going to keep that?
We see Mary siding with Sherlock as he tries to offer his explanation, again drawing more parallels between the two.
Oh, so it's your brother's plan?
Oh, well, he would have needed a confidant.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
But we start to get some contrasts. Sherlock is immediately transparent about the fact that he hates John's mustache, unlike Mary.
Seriously, it's not a joke. You're really keeping this.
Mary likes it.
No, she doesn't.
She does.
She doesn't.
Oh.
He mentions wanting to let John know that he survived, but that he thought it was too risky.
I've nearly been in contact so many times, but I worried that, he might say something indiscreet.
What?
Or, let the cat out of the bag.
Oh, so this is my fault?
Both Sherlock and Mary react the same way to John's anger here. It isn't until Sherlock tries a more direct approach that things start to change.
You have missed this. Admit it. The thrill of the chase, the blood pumping through your veins, just the two of us against the rest of the world.
That pretty explicitly reads as Sherlock flirting, and it's the rejection here where we finally get a hint at the big difference between Sherlock and Mary.
I don't understand. I said I'm sorry, isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Gosh, you don't know anything about human nature, do you?
Nature? No. Human? No.
Sherlock's behavior is coming from a place of ignorance. He honestly thought John would laugh off the reveal and they could run off together on the next adventure. And with Moriarty no longer looming over them, he might have thought they could finally be together. Mary, meanwhile, understands human nature perfectly. She knows what she's doing, and she's mocking Sherlock for not being able to manipulate John as well as she can. And she uses the same tactic on Sherlock, reassuring him that she'll talk John around.
I'll talk him round.
You will?
Oh, yeah.
Sherlock gives her a closer look. Hidden away in this swirl of information are the contradictions that make up who Mary is, disillusioned and romantic. clever, and short-sighted. And the most important clue of all, she's a liar. John leaves with Mary, and Sherlock watches on, nursing his wounds and looking devastated. But we see that night that John is unable to fall asleep, clearly thinking about Sherlock, so we already know their separation won't last. They need each other. Now we get fan theory number 2, another scene that has attracted a lot of ire. A member of Anderson's fan club presents the idea that Sherlock and Moriarty are in love, and that they both faked their deaths on the roof so that they could be together.
What? Are you out of your mind?
Off to a great start, but take a closer look at how Laura carries herself in this scene.
I don't see why not. It's just as plausible as some of your theories.
Look, if you're not going to take it seriously, Laura, you can...
I do take it seriously.
She's framed as a more rational, level-headed person than Anderson is. She's the only one who gets that the hats aren't true to Sherlock.
I don't think we should wear hats.
And she's the one with the gay theory. If we want to dive into it a bit more, big if, the story eventually pays off on the plot, she's actually more on the money than Anderson is. Sherlock and Moriarty are both gay. Moriarty is into Sherlock. They both faked their deaths on the roof. The entire plot of the show boils down to a gay romance. But she is poked fun at a bit, maybe because she's focused on the wrong relationship. Am I being too generous in this interpretation? Maybe. But regardless, I do genuinely believe that these fan theory scenes are a lot less harsh than people say they are. Back to John, we find Mary reading one of his unpublished posts, and John's shaving off the mustache.
Well, you hate it.
Sherlock hates it.
Apparently everyone hates it.
Ooh.
I don't shave for Sherlock Holmes.
You should put that on a t-shirt.
So much of this episode is spent on this mustache plot, and it really only exists to have John changing his appearance for Sherlock, and to have everyone comment on that fact. Back to Baker Street, Sherlock and Mycroft are playing a game that the camera tricks you into thinking is chess, but in reality is Operation.
Can't handle a broken heart. How very telling.
The writer of the episode literally extracting a heart? Okay.
Let's play something different.
Why are we playing games?
London's terror alert has been raised to critical. I'm just passing the time.
Can we stop with the games, please? Oh, but this particular game is Sherlock using information about a client to make a point about himself and Mycroft.
He's different, so what? Why would he mind? Why would anyone mind?
So, mirroring then. The game is mirroring. We then get a couple of scene transition jokes that still get a chuckle out of me.
We made his position quite clear.
Cough?
Oh, dear.
And of course, since John is unavailable, who does Sherlock call but Molly Hooper?
Molly?
Yes.
Would you like to solve
dinner.
crimes?
Is this even subtext? Don't worry, they remind you more than once that Molly is filling in for John.
You sure about this?
Absolutely.
Should I be making notes?
If it makes you feel better.
It's just that that's what John says he does, so if I'm being John...
I'll be John, you're being yourself.
I want you to take a long look at this jumper. Remember this jumper, okay? Burn Molly saying the words, "If I'm being John," while wearing this jumper into your memory. Sherlock says Molly isn't filling in for John, but by the end of the day, it's clear that's not true.
Shut up, John. Shut up.
Why would someone go to all that trouble?
Why indeed, John?
John is likewise miserable away from Sherlock. He even assaults a man thinking that it's him, all the while suppressing a smile. And immediately after work, saunters up to Baker Street looking like this. As a comparison, here's what he looked like 24 hours earlier. This is a stunning glow-up. Unfortunately, before he can talk to Sherlock, he's then kidnapped. Mary's the one to get the news, and although she must understand the message if she recognizes it as a skip code, she brings the text to Sherlock all the same. She seems to know that he's the intended target. That's confirmed in some of the later texts they receive. So the person behind this is someone who knows how to contact Mary, and knows Sherlock's greatest weakness is John. Who might that be? Sherlock figures out that they've put John in a fire, which seems like a deliberate callback to Moriarty's threat to burn the heart out of Sherlock, a line also written by Mark. And here we get the second scene that seems heavily inspired by the Garkgatiss moment.
John! John!
John!
John!
Speaking of other things written by these writers...
Just a standard electrocardio restart. She'll be fine.
Are you all right, my love? Can you hear me?
Ah, it is a relatively simple thing.
I've not found it to be so.
In case you had forgotten in the intervening years, in this particular arc on Doctor Who, written by Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, Jenny and Vastra are the real people Doyle is basing the home stories on.
You realize Dr. Doyle is almost certainly basing his fantastical tales on your own exploits.
And they're a lesbian married couple.
The great detective is, in reality, a woman and her suspiciously intimate companion.
I resent your implication of impropriety. We are married.
And these scenes are identical.
You're right, my love. Can
John!
you hear me? John! I've not found it to be so.
Ah! John goes back to Baker Street the next day to thank Sherlock, and all that mustache build-up finally pays off with this line.
So you shaved it off then?
Yeah. Wasn't working for me.
Yeah, I'm glad.
I didn't like it.
I prefer my doctor's clean shaven.
It's not a sentence you hear every day.
This, by the way, this is why TJLC started around this point. The subtext is a lot more blatant in Series 3. Also, wasn't working for me? Cherchez les miroirs.
What happened to the lipstick?
It wasn't working for me.
Really? I thought it was a big improvement. Mouth's too small now.
Wasn't working for me.
Yeah, I prefer my doctor's clean shaven.
While the parallels between John and Molly involve a lot of callbacks to old jokes, the parallel itself seems to be taken pretty seriously throughout. It seems intentional. Sherlock and John eventually uncover the underground plot. Lord Moran is the one who is organizing the terror strike, and he and the bum are in a missing train carriage. Where?
The whole area is a big mess of old and new stuff.
Hang on, Sumatra Road. You mentioned Sumatra Road, Mr. Holmes. There was a station down there.
Well, why isn't it on the maps?
Because it was closed before it ever opened.
What?
But it all got tied up in legal disputes, so they never built the station on the surface.
Hey look! It's a train! You may think that this is where that running gag finally pays off, but I'm afraid you're going to have to be more patient than that. Trains are like that. They keep you waiting. The bomb is activated while Sherlock and John are inside the carriage. Sherlock panics and tries to make John run, but he doesn't. A nice parallel to the inverse happening in The Great Game. Sherlock manages to turn the bomb off, but he uses the heightened situation as an opportunity to actually talk to John about what happened between them.
I can't do it, John. I don't know how. Forgive me.
What?
Please, John, forgive me for all the hurt that I caused you.
Is this a little messed up? Yeah. Is Sherlock right that John will laugh it off this time? Also, yeah, Sherlock apologizes, specifically bringing up his fear that he's going to ruin John's future with Mary, even though he knows the bomb is off.
You'd still have a future with Mary?
Yeah, I know.
John seems resigned about that, but has also already forgiven Sherlock.
I find it difficult, this sort of stuff.
I know.
You were the best and the wisest man that I have ever known. Yes, of course, I forgive you.
This scene is interrupted by the final explanation for how Sherlock survived, the one more or less presented as the right answer. I think it mostly is, with some embellishments to make Sherlock seem more in control of the situation than he was, the same idea I pointed out last time. There are even some contradictions within this episode. When Sherlock was going to explain how he did it to John, he made it sound like he was calculating scenarios frantically while on the roof, some of them being so ridiculous that it's clear they're just ideas passing through his head.
I calculated that there were 13 possibilities once I'd invited Moriarty onto the roof. The first scenario involved hurling myself into a parked hospital van filled with washing bags. Impossible. The angle was too steep. Secondly, a system of Japanese wrestling.
But he later tells Anderson that it was all worked out rigorously in advance.
There were 13 likely scenarios once we were up on that roof. Each of them were rigorously worked out and given a code name.
And at a few points, you can see how Sherlock is changing events to make it look like he was calm and composed, when we know he wasn't. Anderson is praised one last time for having it right.
You were always right. I wasn't dead.
But again, most people pick up on the fact that the show is saying that this isn't that important. Does that mean that nothing on this show is important? I don't think so. I think the placement here gives a clue for what we should actually care about. The theory interrupts the emotional scene because the focus on cases is getting in the way of what really matters. Sherlock, John, who they really are, and who they are to each other. Their relationship is at the heart of the show. Sherlock reveals that the bomb has been defused, and John laughs it off. And Lord Moran is arrested without being given a single line. This is another plot point that disappointed a lot of fans, that they wasted a great character from the stories. But did they? More on that later. Back at Baker Street, we get a pointed reminder that Sherlock interrupted John's proposal.
Well, once we've actually got engaged.
Yeah.
We were interrupted last time.
Yeah.
Like they want us to wonder about the motivations there. Molly turns up at this point, and we meet her new fiancé. And if there was ever a time to say it, cherchez les miroirs.
This is Tom. Tom, this is everyone.
Hi. It's really nice to meet you all. Hi. Wow. Yeah, hi. I'm John. Good to meet you.
Is it serious, you see?
Yeah. I've moved on.
Oh, God. Is it serious?
Well, I'm moving on.
Did you, Not saying a word. No, best not.
What might they be implying about John's engagement? Downstairs, John tries to get Sherlock to talk about what happened, but after the train car, Sherlock doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Maybe he thinks it wouldn't do any good. John's already made his choice. Sherlock seems on edge about something.
You'd have to be an idiot not to see it. You love it.
Love what?
John brings up the speech he made at Sherlock's grave.
I asked you for one more miracle. I asked you to stop being dead.
I heard you.
And again, they seem to have some silent understanding, but then Sherlock turns away. The episode ends with Sherlock saying he has to go and be Sherlock Holmes, the one the public and John expect. In a show seemingly obsessed with who these characters really are, this seems like a very pointed statement. The persona is not the man. He puts on the deerstalker and goes out to face the press.
Time to go and be Sherlock Holmes.
There's a reason why this is the episode that made people consider that the subtext might actually lead somewhere for the first time. The same way A Scandal in Belgravia took the romantic reading of the Irene Adler story and framed it through John's eyes, made the episode center around him agonizing over Sherlock's possible feelings for her. The Sign of Three takes what ought to be the definitive end of any romantic potential for Sherlock and John's relationship, John's wedding to someone else, and makes that a tragedy. The story of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson has always included John leaving Sherlock to get married. And here the writers seem to be asking if that's really the story you want. Is that really what these characters want? The sadness permeating this episode is present from the beginning. Mrs. Hudson goes up to 221B, and we see Sherlock dancing with an invisible partner. Already we see that Sherlock is missing something. Someone. Mrs. Hudson brings up her own wedding, and given that her husband was a criminal who was later executed much to her delight, that has some interesting implications about John and Mary, but the focus is placed on her friend's reaction.
I remember she left early. I mean, who leaves a wedding early? So sad.
The episode tells us explicitly that we should read someone leaving a wedding early as tragic. Why? Sherlock gets irritated and shoos Mrs. Hudson away, but as soon as he's alone, he looks over at John's chair. He then walks away to get dressed for the big day.
Into battle.
So we're off to a very cheery start for the lighthearted wedding episode. Oh, sorry, did I say wedding episode? I meant best man speech episode. We actually skip right over the wedding. We don't even see them kiss at the altar.
Congratulations! Just the bride and groom, please.
Sherlock? Oh, sorry.
That's a choice. The maid of honor finds Sherlock, and this entire conversation seems to exist just to remind us that Sherlock isn't into women, and it's obvious to most of the women he encounters.
But no sex, okay?
Sorry.
You don't have to look so scared. I'm only messing.
Again, if you went into this episode expecting it to kill Johnlock, you kind of get the opposite. Sherlock redirects the conversation by pointing out attractive men for Janine. His first choice? A recently divorced doctor.
That's the sort of thing you're looking for. The man over there in blue is your best bet. Recently divorced doctor with the ginger cat.
John literally just got married, and Sherlock is already looking forward to the divorce. Love that. Janine starts using Sherlock to help her find handsome men.
Mr. Holmes, you're going to be incredibly useful.
Nothing at all suggestive about that. At the reception, John lights up when a man enters the room. Major James Sholto. Sherlock asks Mary about him and is obviously jealous, which Mary notices and teases him for.
Major Sholto.
Uh-huh.
Why does he barely even mention him?
He mentions him all the time to me. He never shuts up about him.
It's definitely him that he talks about.
Mm-hmm.
Including this line.
That's why he's bouncing around him like a puppy.
Oh, Sherlock. Neither of us were the first, you know.
So the implication here is that Mary and Sherlock are both in love with John, but neither of them are the first person in his life. That person is Sholto? How else do you read this? John Watson is bisexual confirmed, right? It's all fine. Sherlock starts his best man speech with the day John asked him to be best man. And the framing of this is just...
So, the big question. The best man.
I think the big question at a wedding is usually a proposal, which I'll remind you that Sherlock interrupted, and then we never actually saw, but okay, John, sure. Sherlock is still missing the point and says the best man in his eyes was a garroter.
What do you think?
Billy Kincaid, the Camden Garrotter, best man ever, knew vast contributions to charity never disclosed. I ran the best and safest children's homes in North England. Yes, every now and again there'd be some garrottings, but stacking up the lives saved against the garrottings, on balance, I'd say...
For my wedding.
This is another detail I want you to put aside for later. Right next to Molly in the rainbow sweater saying she's being John, and the thing with Mark's trains. We'll be coming back to it. Here, John gets more direct.
And I want to be up there with the two people that I love and care about most in the world.
Yes.
John clearly thinks Sherlock already knows he's one of the two people most important to him. The person he loves the same way he loves the woman he's marrying. He doesn't, though.
So Mary Morstan.
Yes.
And you.
You mean...
Yes.
I'm your best
man.
Friend?
Yeah, of course you are. You're my best friend.
The choice to include this is fascinating. We didn't see the wedding or the proposal. Instead, the emotional core of this wedding episode is the love Sherlock and John have for each other. The feelings they're each certain that the other knows, but they don't. Why is this episode about John and Sherlock's unspoken love for each other? As we cut back to the speech, Sherlock goes on a rant that's an exaggeration of every cold and callous thing he has ever said on the show. And here, it's finally made explicit that this is, at least partially, a persona he's aware of and playing up on purpose.
The point I'm trying to make is that I am the most unpleasant and all-round obnoxious arsehole that anyone could possibly have the misfortune to meet.
That because of these failings, he feels unworthy of John.
So if I didn't understand I was being asked to be best man, it is because I never expected to be anybody's best friend. And certainly not the best friend of the bravest and kindest and wisest human being I have ever had the good fortune of knowing.
But he thinks Mary is good enough for him.
I cannot congratulate you on your choice of companion. Actually, now I can. When I say you deserve this man, it is the highest compliment of which I am capable.
Sherlock is saying, out loud, that he is stepping aside so that John can be with someone good enough for him. This is heartbreaking, and that's before we get this.
So know this, today you sit between the woman you have made your wife and the man you have saved. In short, the two people who love you most in all this world.
Sherlock loves John just as much as Mary does. From John's reaction, he seems moved, to say the least. But he is still holding something back from Sherlock.
If I try and hug him, stop me.
Certainly not.
If this is just a friendship, why? The room, moved to tears at this declaration of love and devotion, applauds when John forgets his restraint and hugs Sherlock.
Oh, shit.
Did I do it wrong?
No, you didn't.
Come in. I haven't finished yet. Yeah, I know.
So on to some funny stories. Can you wait till I sit down?
Reminder, we do not see John and Mary's vows. We do not see the crowd cheer as they kiss at the altar. Instead, we see this. These are intentional choices. Sherlock's speech continues with some of the cases he and John have solved over the years. Sherlock mentions that the stories are romanticized a bit.
The record of our time together. Of course, he does tend to romanticize things a bit, but then, you know, he's a romantic.
God. It's also just after this that Sherlock draws our attention to the elephant in the room.
And of course, I have to mention the elephant in the room.
I don't think it was unreasonable to draw a connection between what just happened and the concept of an obvious truth going unaddressed. In another flashback, we see John is completely uninterested in wedding planning, while Sherlock is over-invested.
Swan or Sydney Opera House?
Where'd you learn to do that?
Many unexpected skills required in the field of criminal investigation.
Fibbing, Sherlock.
I once broke an alibi by demonstrating the exact severity of a
I'm
fault.
not John, I can tell when you're fibbing.
Okay, I learned it on YouTube.
We just had to be reminded that John can't tell when Sherlock is hiding things in this episode, of all places. We also get some hints that no one likes Mary.
Who else hates me? Oh, great, thanks.
And John seems remarkably unbothered about that. This is the same man that once punched a police chief just for calling Sherlock a weirdo. Mary pulls John aside and calls out the fact that Sherlock is obviously worried about the wedding. John doesn't see it though.
He's terrified.
Of course he's not.
Right, you know when you're scared of something, you start wishing it sooner just to get it all going? That's what he's doing.
Why would he be scared that we're getting married? It's not going to change anything. We'll still do stuff.
Gee, John, I wonder. John has to practically beg Sherlock to take a case.
Get me out of here.
You want to go out on a case? No.
Please. Sherlock for me.
Don't you worry about a thing. I'll get you out of this.
So we see that Sherlock cares about something more than cases. This episode is just so much, especially when you're paying attention to those central questions. The answers being hinted at here, well, it seems like everything's finally starting to point in one clear direction. Take the case that finally catches Sherlock's attention.
Uniform fetishist. All the nice girls like a soldier.
It's sailor.
Even John seems to pick up on that one. Mary comes back and reveals she was likewise pressuring Sherlock to find a case for John, instead of talking to both of them directly, which seems like it would make more sense. Almost like she's manipulating both of them and wants to place herself as central to their relationship, the gatekeeper of their access to one another. There are a lot of mixed signals with her character, to say the least. Sherlock brings up Sholto, and the wording of this conversation is fairly loaded.
So why don't you see him anymore?
Who?
Your previous commander, Sholto.
Previous commander?
I meant ex.
John picks up on the fact that Sherlock is afraid of the same thing happening to him, and tries to make it clear that Sherlock is just as important to him as Mary.
You know it won't alter anything, right? Me and Mary getting married? We'll still be doing all this. The thing about Mary is she has completely turned my life around. Changed everything. But for the record, over the last few years, there are two people who have done that, and the other one is a complete dickhead.
Sherlock running off in the middle of an emotional conversation after seeming so upset is one of those classic BBC Sherlock contradictions. At first, it makes him look unfeeling, but you might also wonder why Sherlock ran away while John was talking about how Mary completely turned his life around. Their investigation eventually leads to them finding Bainbridge fatally wounded but still breathing, and John manages to save his life.
Let me examine this body. He's still breathing.
Oh my God.
Stephen, stay with me.
And then we get this remarkable statement from Sherlock.
The most perfect locked room mystery of which I am aware. But in all of this, there is only one element which could be said to be truly remarkable. There was one feature, and only one feature of interest in the whole of this baffling case, and quite frankly, it was the usual. John Watson, who, while I was trying to solve a murder, instead saved a life.
So here, at the midpoint of the Sign of Three, let's revisit the idea that this show exists to ask three main questions that actually all twine into one. We've seen it over and over again at this point. These are either questions that the writers are fascinated with for their own sake, or they're questions that the writers intend to eventually answer. And the thing is, I think they just answered all of them.
There are mysteries worth solving and stories worth telling. The best and bravest man I know, and on top of that, he actually knows how to do stuff.
Sherlock isn't a heartless machine. He isn't even particularly interested in cases. The one thing he cares about? John Watson. Is John a valuable part of the story? Yes, unambiguously. He does things Sherlock can't. He'll go a step beyond solving a murder and save a life. What are they to each other? At the very least, they love each other just as much as John and Mary do. But there are feelings between them that have never been spoken, even though they both think the other knows them. So the one overarching question, what are the Holmes stories actually about? It's not about the cases. It's a love story between Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. Or at the very least, a story about their love for one another. And you can't quite read this as purely platonic. It always goes a step beyond that anytime their relationship is examined. So from a writing standpoint, I don't know how you intend to raise these questions for their own sake, while also answering them all that clearly. And it continues. Sherlock is obsessed with planning the perfect stag night, and asks Molly for help. We get a glimpse of his John file, and see that he has pasted John's head onto the Vitruvian man's body, Da Vinci's version of the ideal male body. And as Molly reacts, the screen erupts with rainbows. And that's not the only fun bit of lighting. Sherlock is being very careful that neither of them get drunk, but John seems to want something stronger than beer.
Quick, one more. He mustn't see.
Is he afraid? As he sneaks away, we get the original bisexual lighting shot. Unless, of course, you count the subtle background lighting at Angelo's.
Do you have a boyfriend? Which is fine, by the way.
I know it's fine.
So you've got a boyfriend?
No.
Right, okay.
They return home and we hear yet again that neither Sherlock or John are quite the person the public thinks they are.
I have an international reputation. Do you have an international reputation?
No, I don't have an international reputation.
No. And I can't even remember what for. Crime. Something or other.
John saying he doesn't have an international reputation calls to mind the Three Continents Watson characterization, and particularly this moment from Private Life.
After all, you have an enviable record with the fair sex. Damn right. I can get women from 3 continents to testify for me, and you can get women to vouch for you too, can't you, Holmes?
But this John doesn't have an international reputation. Upstairs, Sherlock and John play a game of 20 questions. John falls and grabs Sherlock's knee.
I don't mind.
Am I?
This is another moment I want you to put a pin in. We're going to come back to it in a later video, and I'm going to make this choice even worse. They're interrupted, though, by a client whose story might sound oddly familiar.
I don't a lot. I mean, I don't date all that much. He seemed nice, you know? We seemed to automatically connect. We had one night, dinner, such interesting conversation. It was lovely. To be honest, I'd love to have gone further, but I thought, no, this is special. Let's take it slowly.
Because of Tessa's story, Sherlock looks into a string of women all claiming to have gone on a date with a ghost, who apparently was just a man after some one-night stands. Perhaps not the most appropriate choice of story for a wedding reception.
Our Mayfly man was trying to escape the suffocating chains of domesticity, and he used his wits, cleverness, and powers of disguise to play the field. He was... On second thoughts, I probably should have told you about the elephant in the room.
As if to make up for that blunder, Sherlock again writes himself out of the story.
This blog is the story of 2 men and their frankly ridiculous adventures. But from now on, there's a new story, a bigger adventure. Today begin the adventures of Mary Elizabeth Watson and John Hamish Watson.
He's all but resigned himself to this, that his life with John is over. Everything will be different, and that's the ending he deserves. But suddenly, something changes. This moment, this epiphany, centers around a part of John's identity that he keeps secret.
You said John Hamish Watson. You said that. You said Hamish. How did you know his middle name?
That Sherlock only knows about because he dug into John's past.
Never tells anyone. He hates it. Took him years to confide in me.
That's my birth certificate.
Yep.
A truth that one of the only other people who knows it is Irene Adler.
And the woman, she knew.
Hamish. John Hamish Watson. Just if you were looking for baby names.
Look at us both.
And that the nurse here only knows about because of James Sholto, John's ex-commander, the first before Sherlock or Mary.
You knew about the wedding. More importantly, you'd seen a wedding invitation.
An epiphany where Mark, I mean Mycroft, steps in to practically say into the camera that all of this is intentional.
Could be a coincidence.
Oh, Sherlock. What do we say about coincidence?
The universe is rarely so lazy.
That someone has taken extraordinary lengths to get to this point.
What great length?
They lied, assumed false identities.
Which suggests?
Criminal intent.
Also suggests?
Intelligence, planning.
Clearly.
And the result of this epiphany that Mark is pushing Sherlock towards?
You. It's always you. John Watson, you keep me right.
What do I do?
Oh, you've already done it. Don't solve the murder. Save the life.
A romantic declaration. The way this scene culminates doesn't really make sense unless you're reading into it. That this is Sherlock realizing that he has it wrong. John hasn't really chosen Mary. John just didn't know that Sherlock was an option because he never clearly stated his feelings. Sherlock figures out that Sholto is the target, and we get even more comparisons between them while Sholto stares into a mirror.
Mr. Holmes, you and I are similar, I think.
Yes, I think we are. We wouldn't do that, would we? You and me. We would never do that to John Watson.
This episode is preoccupied with John's relationship to these 3 people and equates them constantly.
I'm going to break it down.
Wait, you won't have to.
I believe I am in need of medical attention.
I believe I'm your doctor.
John loved Sholto. John loves Mary. John loves Sherlock. This is the focus during the episode that he gets married. And John's feelings for Sherlock whatever they might be, are reciprocated. Sherlock stands in front of the crowd and offers his vows to John and Mary.
Here in front of you all, my first and last vow. Mary and John, whatever it takes, whatever happens, from now on, I swear I will always be there. Always. For all three of you.
But here things turn on their head yet again. Mary is apparently pregnant, and that complicates things. Yet another instance of the show headed in one clear direction and then veering hard right. John doesn't seem particularly happy about the news.
Shut up. Just shut up. Sorry. How did he notice before me? I'm a bloody doctor.
Here I want to bring up the 2016 Tumblr Q&A again. One fan asked if this song choice was intentional, because it plays the line, "You know I didn't even know her name," while John looks to Mary. And John literally does not know her name. Stephen's response? It's a coincidence. Your theories are much cleverer than reality. That response has been haunting me for years, because picking a score that fits the scene is filmmaking basics. Even trailer studios get that much right. In fact, some films, like Suicide Squad as an example, are criticized for being too on the nose with their song choices. So this not being intentional? Embarrassing if true. But as much as I am steering clear of trying to convince you on TJLC, I will say this. It's possible he might have said that, because if "you know I didn't even know her name" was on purpose, then all of this was too.
Right. Yeah, we can't all three dance. There are limits.
Yes, there are.
And all of that takes the subtext, the idea that Sherlock is devastated here for romantic reasons, and makes it explicit. Without it, there's still plausible deniability, if only just. Mrs. Hudson's friend left a wedding early too, after all. But either way, the ending is a tragic one. The Sign of the Four, the novel this episode is based on, ends as follows. "The division seems rather unfair," I remarked. "You have done all the work in this business. I get a wife out of it. Jones gets the credit. Pray, what remains for you?" "For me," said Sherlock Holmes, "there still remains the cocaine bottle." And he stretched his long white hand up for it. In that first week after The Sign of Three initially aired, people already guessed exactly where this was leading next. After a honeymoon of bliss, things have continued on as ever. Sherlock and John still go out on cases, John goes home to Mary, and everyone is happy. Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. I meant to say, literally everyone is miserable. John is having dreams about Sherlock seducing him with promises of adventure, and is an angry wreck without him.
There is nothing the matter with me. Imagine I said that without shouting.
Of course, Mary, always so supportive of that relationship, understands, right? She tells John to go find Sherlock with a wink and a nod.
But is it Sherlock Holmes you want? Because I've not seen him in ages.
About a month. Who is Sherlock Holmes? See? That does happen.
Now, I'm not saying that Mary should just blindly put up with John's nonsense. She shouldn't. But this is a stark contrast to the character we've seen for the first two episodes. It's like she wants John to get over needing Sherlock. Even before the reveal in this episode, we're seeing a new Mary. All of this is to say nothing of Sherlock, who is just so happy for his friend getting married that he's back on drugs for the first time in at least 5 years.
Oh, hello, John. Didn't expect to see you here. Come for me too.
He claims it's for a case, of course, but he also implies that he's on drugs for the same reason that John is so worked up.
What kind of case would need you doing this?
I might as well ask you why you started cycling to work.
No, we're not playing this game.
So, the wedding? And what specifically is going on with John there?
Yeah, it's probably just an addict in need of a fix.
Yes, I think in a way it was.
You keep your shirts folded, ready to pack.
If the writers wanted to include the twist of Mary's past, but still have the audience root for her and John, there are ways to do that. Show them happy and in love, Mary nervous about something we don't understand. You could probably even still have her shoot Sherlock, and pull it off with a bit of tweaking, but that's not what they did. We never really see John and Mary happy together, and here it looks like John is already looking for a way out of their marriage, because he misses Sherlock. And in case all of that wasn't clear enough on its own, cherchez les miroirs.
Sorry your engagement's over. I'm fairly grateful for the lack of a ring.
Stop it. Just stop it.
Back at Baker Street, they find Mycroft, along with Anderson and some of his friends.
Some members of your little fan club, to be polite, they're entirely trustworthy, and even willing to search through the toxic waste dump that you are pleased to call a flat.
Like, see, the show does poke fun at these fans, but also praises them just as often. Straight from the writer's mouth and everything. Speaking of which, Sherlock finally reveals who he's after, Magnuson, a media tycoon, who uses his access to information and secrets to blackmail people, and Mycroft's reaction?
Magnuson. Charles Augustus Magnuson.
If you go against Magnuson, then you will find yourself going against me.
Fascinating. If you are reading meta into it, why might the writers consider themselves in league with the press they show so much derision towards? Mycroft and the fans leave, and John asks about the case, clearly wanting in on it.
What sort of case? Too big and dangerous for any sane individual to get involved in.
You trying to put me off?
God, no. I'm trying to recruit you. Stay out of my bedroom.
Why is solving crimes repeatedly framed as some taboo desire that the two share? A way they can only be fulfilled with each other, the way they both get off. I haven't focused in on the pattern of contradictory information the show is constantly throwing out in a while, but this scene is a perfect example.
Hey, what happened to my chair?
It's blocking my view to the kitchen.
Well, it's good to be missed.
Is Sherlock back on drugs because he's heartbroken that John got married? Oh no, Sherlock has a girlfriend now, and John is insanely jealous.
Oh, John, hi. How are you?
Janine?
But Sherlock is seemingly playing into that on purpose.
So, just a guess, but you've probably got some questions.
Yeah, one or two, pretty much.
Naturally.
So Sherlock is trying to give John a taste of his own medicine? No, it's all a ruse. It's for a case. Sherlock thinks love is a human error.
Did you just get engaged to break into an office?
Yeah.
Sherlock, she loves you.
Yes, like I said, human error.
Except he's sure to remind us that women aren't his area. Specifically, women.
So I imagine she'll want to stop seeing me at that point, but you're the expert on women.
And now let's look at that formula on a larger scale. The entire episode so far has been about John and Sherlock's relationship, right? As if the whole story is about their relationship. Fancy that. But you can't let the focus stay there for too long, can you? Series 3 has used the same counterpoint every time. Sherlock and John's reunion happens while John is proposing to Mary. In The Sign of 3, Sherlock says his adventure with John doesn't matter. It's the adventures of John and Mary. Sherlock basically admits he's in love with John. Well, now Mary is pregnant. And so who can they possibly find in this tower but Mary herself? But now the mask is gone. Magnuson asks if Mary plans to kill them both, and Mary smiles.
What do you do now? Kill us both?
Mary.
Sherlock offers to help, no matter what her secrets are, and Mary threatens to kill him.
Oh, Sherlock, if you take one more step, I swear I will kill you.
Sherlock is sure she wouldn't. She knows what that would do to John. He's wrong.
No, Mrs. Watson. You won't.
Before we get into the montage of Sherlock trying to stay alive, I also want to point out that you can see Magnuson reaching for his phone here. In fact, this detail is even included in the script. Magnuson is the one to call the ambulance, which contradicts what Sherlock will later say. Also a contradiction, Sherlock is certain that his wound is fatal.
You're almost certainly going to die, so we need to focus. What's going to kill you?
What was directly behind you when you were murdered?
You're going into shock. It's the next thing that's going to kill you.
They're putting me down too now.
You might also notice that Sherlock's mind palace is built around his first case with John, the halls of Roland Kerr Further Education College, and the stairway of the house at Lauriston Gardens. Which is a choice. John finds Sherlock collapsed on the floor and bleeding, and is furious.
Who shot him?
Emergency. Which service do you require?
Not boding well for his relationship with Mary. Sherlock is more or less correct. The wound is fatal. He flatlines on the operating table, and the doctors give up on him.
We're losing you.
You're gonna love being dead, Sherlock.
So why doesn't he die? It's not the people who will mourn him.
Mrs. Hudson will cry, and Mummy and Daddy will cry, and the woman will cry.
It's not even that John will mourn him the most.
And John will cry buckets and buckets. It's him that I worry about the most.
He only pulls himself back when Moriarty mentions this.
That wife. You're letting him down, Sherlock. John Watson is definitely in danger.
I wonder about this a lot. Why are we shown all of this? Magnuson calling the ambulance, the words kill and die and murder over and over. Mary herself saying she's going to kill Sherlock. Not shoot him, kill him. Sherlock flatlining. Sherlock's motivation being his fear of what Mary will do to John if we're meant to believe anything that comes after. And Mary's response to Sherlock surviving isn't doing her any favors.
His first word when he woke up? Mary.
Sherlock. You don't tell John. Look at me. And tell me you're not going to tell him.
Sherlock now imagines Mary as being cold and threatening.
Mary Watson, who are you?
And then he runs off. Mary again seems more menacing than concerned.
So where would he go?
Oh, Christ knows. Try finding Sherlock in London.
But she does correctly identify the person who will know Sherlock's secrets best. His fan.
Leinster Gardens. It's his #1 bolt hole. Top secret.
He only knows about it because he stalked him one night.
Followed.
Yeah.
Back at Baker Street, John has pieced together that Sherlock knows who shot him, and we get this painfully oblivious question.
Protecting the shooter, why?
But protecting someone, then. But why would he care? He's Sherlock. Who would he bother protecting?
Gee, John, I wonder. The fact that we know Sherlock's motivations here while John doesn't seems like more clever setup, that he has a plan that John doesn't know. John sees the perfume bottle and then Sherlock calls.
It's Sherlock, John. Sherlock. John, you have to answer it.
We don't get to see their conversation. And then we get the scene. Mary is on a mission to find Sherlock with the sole intent of silencing him, and Sherlock helpfully narrates what we're in for here.
23 and 24 Leinster Gardens. The empty houses. It's just a facade. Remind you of anyone, Mary? A facade.
Let me provide some context. The episode The Empty Hearse got its name from The Empty House, the story where Holmes returns to London after going over the Reichenbach Falls with Moriarty, and where he finally reunites with Watson. In that short story, there is just one piece of Moriarty's network left to eliminate: Sebastian Moran, Moriarty's right hand, an excellent marksman, and a ruthless killer. Moran had been there that day on the Reichenbach Falls, saw Holmes survive, and tried to finish the job. We meet a Moran in The Empty Hearse, and he's a tremendous disappointment. He doesn't even get a single line. But another character is also introduced in that episode. And here in this scene, The Empty Houses, she is given almost the entirety of Moran's plot, beat for beat. From references to fatal card games.
Do you own this place?
I won it in a card game with the Clarence House cannibal. Nearly cost me my kidneys, but fortunately I had a straight flush. Quite a gambler, that woman.
To reinforcing that she's an excellent marksman.
And yet, over the distance of 6 feet, you failed to make a kill shot.
To a trick with a dummy to keep her from shooting the real Sherlock.
Dummy. I suppose that was a fairly obvious trick.
The only thing not mentioned here, a potential connection to Moriarty. So this is the real reason why people thought Mary was a villain, because this scene sets her up as the Moran figure of the story, and it potentially ties her into the broader plot if you're following M theory. I mean, while we're on the topic of the empty house...
My collection of M's is a fine one, said he. Moriarty himself is enough to make any letter illustrious, and here is Morgan, the poisoner, and Meridew, of abominable memory, and Matthews, who knocked out my left canine in the waiting room at Charing Cross, and finally, here is our friend of tonight. He handed over the book, and I read. Moran Sebastian, Colonel. The second most dangerous man in London.
On top of that, Mary is acting in ways that make no sense if she didn't mean to kill Sherlock. She threatens to shoot him again, and only doesn't because he reminds her that her face is being projected on the building.
How good a shot are you?
How badly do you want to find out?
If I die here, my body will be found in a building with your face projected on the front of it. Even Scotland Yard could get somewhere with that.
She doesn't so much as breathe a word about the shot being surgery, and seems confused when Sherlock says it was.
That was surgery. I'll take the case.
What case?
And the clincher, the thing that truly sets Mary apart from Sherlock. Sherlock has lied to John, but the big lies have all been to keep him safe, or to save a life. Mary's reason for hiding who she is?
Because John can't ever know that I lied to him. It would break him and I would lose him forever. And Sherlock, I will never let that happen. There is nothing in this world I would not do to stop that happening.
Mary knows that John wouldn't love her if he knew who she really was. She lies to keep him. Sherlock looks almost disgusted with her and reveals that it's already too late.
Sorry. Not that obvious a trick.
And then the story jumps forward. After the Reichenbach fall, the show is constantly playing around with chronology. I want to play you a clip of Stephen saying why he chose to present this portion of the episode in the order he did.
Yeah, but it's a fun thing, isn't it? Because I mean, I think this whole sequence has been rather wonderful. But the truth is, it's structurally allows you to get past the fact that Mary's has shot Sherlock and been revealed to be a villain, and now he's going to be forgiven. In a relatively short space of time, and you sort of buy it. Curiously, I think if you did that in a linear way, you think not enough time has passed somehow.
Has been revealed to be a villain and is now going to be forgiven, and you sort of buy it. Those are some word choices. The night of the confrontation, John is understandably furious and asks how he ended up in this relationship. Sherlock's response?
John, you are addicted to a certain lifestyle. You're abnormally attracted to dangerous situations and people, so is it truly such a surprise that the woman you fall in love with conforms to that pattern?
This is a fact about John that has been subtext all along, that he's attracted to dangerous situations and people. We've been getting that since the first Oh God, Yes. That's part of who he is. John knows it too. He doesn't contest that. His question is what that has to do with Mary.
But she wasn't supposed to be like that. Why is she like that?
Which I don't know how to understand as anything other than John admitting he deliberately picked someone who he thought was safe after Sherlock's death, because he knew he couldn't recover from another heartbreak. He knows he's attracted to dangerous people because he knows he's attracted to Sherlock, and Sherlock throws it back in his face.
Because you chose her.
He tells John not to focus on the heartbreak, but on the case.
John, listen, be calm and answer me. What is she?
Okay. Your way. Always your way.
We cut forward briefly and see that Mary is still more dismissive than apologetic.
Oh, are we doing conversation today? It really is Christmas. I mean, seriously, months of silence, and we're going to do this now.
And we cut back to an explanation of Mary's actions that makes absolutely no sense. It seems to me that if what Sherlock was saying was true, Mary would have brought it up herself. But she doesn't. She lets Sherlock give her a cover story, and she remains silent as he spins his tale, waiting for him to provide all the details, rather than jumping in with her own information to defend herself. And she uses Sherlock's explanation that John knew deep down who she was to her advantage, even though she literally just said that if John found out the truth, she would lose him.
So that's what you were, an assassin. How could I not see that?
You did see that. And you married me. Because he's right. It's what you like.
That's leaving aside the most blatant contradictions. Magnuson made the call. Sherlock flatlined. The doctors gave up on him. Sherlock thinks Mary is dangerous. So this has to be a lie, right? Look at what Sherlock says as his heart gives out.
John. John? John, Magnuson is all that matters now. You can trust Mary.
We see John glaring at Mary as Sherlock goes into cardiac arrest, but we immediately cut forward to their reconciliation, which John says he scripted with the greatest of care.
I've thought long enough about what I want to say to you. These are prepared words, Mary.
chosen these words with care.
Okay.
And there are a few things that read as more threatening than conciliatory.
The problems of your past are your business. The problems of your future are my privilege. All this does not mean that I'm not still basically pissed off with you.
I know.
I am very pissed off, and it will come out now and then.
I know.
And even now, Mary is still getting in the last word.
Can I choose the baby's name?
Not a chance.
Okay.
She never apologizes to John. So with all of that being as weird and disjointed and nonsensical as it is, I don't think it was unreasonable to wonder if John had an ulterior motive here. That he was doing things Sherlock's way, or he was trying to be there for the baby. This entire plotline is so incredibly odd at face value. But under the surface, using the TJLC reading we've been constructing and reinforcing over these last episodes, there's some amazing potential here. Outside, Sherlock and Mycroft talk about Magnuson, and we learn just what Sherlock hates about him.
Why do you hate him?
Because he attacks people who are different and preys on their secrets. Why don't you?
He never causes too much damage to anyone important. He's far too intelligent for that. A necessary evil, not a dragon for you to slay.
Necessary evil, is he? Mycroft also brings back the fairy tale language, calling Sherlock a dragon slayer, just like Moriarty did.
But soon, the other knights began to grow tired of his stories about how brave he was and how many dragons he'd slain.
Another plotline with a lot of potential. Mycroft also seems to know that Sherlock has drugged the punch and is willingly going along with it.
Perhaps there was something in the punch.
Clearly. Go and have some more.
Which matches what Magnuson will say later.
Mycroft has been looking for this opportunity for a long time.
So this is bringing back that idea that there are enemies Mycroft wants to defeat, but feels like he can't go against directly. Which leads me to the elephant in the room. Am I seriously supposed to believe that Mycroft doesn't know who Mary is, doesn't know she shot Sherlock, or doesn't care?
Somebody's put a bullet in my boy. If I ever find out who, I shall turn absolutely monstrous.
That is a glaring plot hole. What alternative is there? He knows who she is and what she's done, but can't act against her. If she is Moran, then she's working for someone we already know Mycroft is terrified of.
People like him, we know about them, we watch them. But James Moriarty, the most dangerous criminal mind the world has ever seen.
And again, the meta layer ties directly into it. Is there something deeper going on with Mycroft? Does this all make sense? That's not the real question. The real question is if there's more to the writer's plans than they're letting on. At Appledore, Magnuson takes credit for the bonfire, but he, like Mycroft, brings back the fairy tale language, specifically about the fire being a way to reveal Sherlock's heart.
Very hard to find a pressure point on you, Mr. Holmes.
And every person has their pressure point. Someone that they want to protect from harm.
So how are you going to do it? Burn me. Well, look how you care about John Watson. Your damsel in distress.
Magnuson claims he had people on standby. He was never going to let John die. But he's also very careful not to do anything actually illegal, which kidnapping someone absolutely would be. Maybe someone else was actually behind this. But who? Perhaps the same person who taught Magnuson that this trick would work.
Vaults. What vaults? There are no vaults beneath this building. The Appledore vaults are my mind palace.
I knew you'd fall for it. That's your weakness. You always want everything to be clever.
Finale number 2 with an it's not actually that clever after all twist. It's definitely establishing a pattern at this point. The question is why? Is the show saying that it's wrong to assume things are clever? Or is there a reason it's always the villains pulling these twists? Sherlock can't let John go to prison, so he sacrifices everything for him while both claiming to be a sociopath and to have done it for Mary.
I'm not a hero. I'm a high-functioning sociopath. Merry Christmas! Give my love to Mary. Tell her she's safe now.
The commentary there isn't particularly subtle. 1 week later, Sherlock takes enough drugs to overdose and prepares to say goodbye to John forever. And during this final meeting, we get a callback to Reichenbach, where John admitted to having something he wanted to say to Sherlock but never did. He wasn't alone in that.
John, there's something I should say. I've meant to say always and I never have. Since it's unlikely we'll ever meet again, I might as well say it now. Sherlock is actually a girl's name.
People say this is obviously just another gay joke, but even the punchline here calls back to John's jealousy over Irene.
Hamish. John Hamish Watson. Just if you were looking for baby names.
William Sherlock Scott Holmes.
Sorry?
That's the whole of it. If you're looking for baby names.
No, we've had a scam. We're pretty sure it's a girl.
Sherlock is actually a girl's name.
So I don't think it was ridiculous to take this seriously, to wonder if this really is exactly what it looks like. An aborted declaration of love. Sherlock prepares to fly away, and it looks like the series is going to end in tragedy, until the credits are interrupted for one final reveal. Moriarty is back.
Miss me?
BBC Sherlock has a bit of a Schrodinger's cat problem going on. Are the things in the background that seem to be setting up a deep and interconnected story actually going to lead somewhere? Or are the writers just throwing ideas out there because they find them interesting before discarding them and moving on to the next? Until the box has been opened, there's no way to know for sure. Nowhere is this dilemma more apparent than in The Abominable Bride. I still adore this episode, and I'm prepared to adore it completely ignoring authorial intent. But the thing is, if you are reading the subtext, you can follow a clear trail of logic throughout this otherwise nonsensical episode, and all of that is only enhanced by the way the meta elements are made more apparent in the Victorian setting. The same exact strategies that lead you to wonder if Mycroft is working for Moriarty, if Mary is Moran, and if John and Sherlock are currently locked in a desperately unspoken love affair allow you to make perfect sense of this episode. So does that mean it's the correct method? I still can't say, but as always, it is the better story, one that is more thoughtful and consistent, and has profound implications that I still love. And so that's how we're going to be viewing it. The beginning of the episode is completely unnecessary once you know the twist. Why are we starting with Holmes and Watson's meeting? Well, simple. Sherlock was just reading the story of how he and John met. That was his way into this dream. And how does he view his actions looking back? He's both much more openly pleased with Watson, while also much more abrupt in his actions.
Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock.
Excellent reflexes. You'll do. The conclusion seemed inescapable.
Oh, well.
And you're clearly acclimatized to never getting to the end of a sentence. We'll get along splendidly.
So this is our beginner course. If we're paying attention, this episode is going to tell us what Sherlock really thinks and feels under the mask. That initially he was thrilled to meet John, but he also thinks he was rather rude. More rude than he actually was. Another example, he doesn't think John's blog is particularly accurate, especially around the middle of series 2.
Don't feel singled out, Mrs. Hudson. I'm hardly in the dog one.
This was about the time John was repeatedly speculating in public on his blog that Sherlock was in love with Irene Adler, in case that comes up again. But the big question going into this episode, what we were all wondering, did Sherlock mean what he told John in his last vow? Does he trust Mary and think the two of them deserve each other? Well...
You have recently married a man of a seemingly kindly disposition who has now abandoned you for an unsavory companion of dubious morals.
Mary?
John.
And then he plays the song he wrote for their first dance as the soundtrack to their argument about how John keeps abandoning Mary to be with Sherlock.
Don't mind you going, my darling. I mind you leaving me behind.
But what could you do?
Well, what do you do? Except wander around, taking notes, looking surprised.
Enough.
Guys, I think Sherlock maybe doesn't like Mary and thinks John is going to leave her to be with him, which was apparently vital to establish before focusing on the case, one that goes deep.
The stage is set. The curtain rises. We are ready to begin. I shall have to go deep.
Deep into what?
Myself.
The layers in this one. Lestrade comes in with a case and mentions that Mrs. Hudson wouldn't speak to him.
I fear she has branched into literary criticism by means of satire. It is a distressing trend in the modern landlady.
Oh, so the thing about certain choices seeming like satire to point out the absurdity of reading the Holmes stories in a certain way is intentional then? The case Sherlock wants to solve has elements of Moriarty's death, obviously, his own staged suicide, his eventual return to John, and his deduction that Mary was pregnant.
It's a shotgun wedding.
Sherlock and John follow after Lestrade, and we linger on Mary.
What a life those gentlemen lead.
Yes, those gentlemen.
So it seems like Sherlock still has some conflicted thoughts, like he ought to feel bad over John abandoning Mary. They were friends. But then Mary gets a letter from a mysterious M.
Friend in need.
Oh dear, what friend?
England.
Well, That's not very specific.
Both the ambiguous M and the wording here, England needs her, call to mind both Mycroft, who summoned Sherlock back with similar wording.
He needs me this time.
Did you miss me? Did you miss me? Did you miss me?
England.
And Moriarty, the reason Sherlock was called back to begin with.
Miss me?
So it seems like Sherlock is aware Mary isn't working alone. He just doesn't quite know who with. In the morgue, we get this delightful line.
Maybe it was a secret twin.
A what?
A secret twin, you know? A twin that nobody knows about. This whole thing could have been planned.
Since the moment of conception, how breathtakingly prescient of her. It is never twins, Watson.
So you guys think introducing a secret sibling is a silly plot idea? Agree with you there. Glad to hear you guys think so too. Nice to know I won't have to worry about that cropping up. The second major break in reality occurs when Sherlock sees the YOU writing, a clear callback to Moriarty's IOU message, which, to date, still has not paid off.
Bullet through the brain, back of the head blown clean off. How could he survive?
We see Sherlock's current theory in his explanation to Lestrade.
It is perfectly simple. The incident of the mysterious Mrs. Ricoletti, the killer from beyond the grave, has been widely reported in the popular press. Now people are disguising their own dull little murders as the work of a ghost.
So Sherlock is sure that Moriarty isn't actually back. Sherlock has shifted focus for the time being to Mycroft, figuring out his involvement in things. But since Sherlock perceives Mycroft as always making fun of him for getting sentimental, this scene includes a lot of jabs over Sherlock's feelings for John.
Hush, please. This is a matter of supreme importance.
What is?
The obliquity of the ecliptic. I have to understand it.
Didn't Dr. Watson move out a few months ago?
Mycroft!
This is what people do, Sherlock. They get married.
I warned you. Don't
get involved.
The obliquity of the ecliptic.
Come at once, you said. I assumed it was important.
It is. It's the inclination of the Earth's equator to the path of the sun on the celestial plane.
That the Earth goes around the sun.
Oh, God, that again. It's not important.
Not important. It's primary school stuff. How can you not know that? I deduce we're on our way to see someone cleverer than you.
Sherlock's business seems to be booming since you and he became pals.
Do you understand it?
Yes, of course I understood it. It was perfectly simple.
No. Did you understand the murderous jealousy?
Look at that, Mrs. Hudson. Quiet, calm, peaceful. Isn't it hateful?
Rest assured, it has features of interest.
I never really say that.
You really do.
There was one feature, and only one feature of interest in the whole of this baffling case, and quite frankly, it was the usual. John Watson. Did you summon me here just to humiliate me?
It seems like this distracts Sherlock from really figuring out what Mycroft's role might be. But, of course, no Mycroft scene would be complete without some meta-references. So we start with Holmes and Watson speaking to Wilder in sign language, because he's not allowed to speak to them out loud. Mycroft then goes on about a war he thinks he must lose.
But these enemies, how are we to defeat them if you won't tell us about them?
We don't defeat them. We most certainly lose to them.
Why?
Because they are right and we are wrong.
And of course, the clip I have played 3 times at this point, Wilder coming in, telling Mark that the fans obsessing over themes and the true meaning of their favorite series would like a word, and Mark saying they might have to wait a bit longer than they thought.
Thank you, Wilder.
Also, Mr. Mellis to see you, Mr. Holmes.
Give me 5 minutes. I have a wager to win. Better make that 15.
Put a giant pin in that. I cannot with that. Back to the case. Lord and Lady Carmichael are pretty straightforward stand-ins for Mary and John, respectively. So we see that Sherlock thinks Mary is rude and dismissive towards her spouse, has dark secrets in her past that somehow tie into the ghost of Ricoletti, aka Moriarty's return, a connection which is strengthened by the use of orange pips, just like the Great Game, and Mary is now expecting to die.
Eustace, what does this mean?
Death.
What?
It means death.
In other words, Sherlock thinks someone is orchestrating Moriarty's return to threaten Mary. The question is who? On the flip side of that, Sherlock is clearly still wondering if Mary and Mycroft are working together.
I now rely on you to keep an eye on things, but he must never suspect you are working for me. Are you clear on that, Watson?
You can rely on me, Mr. Holmes.
Which makes sense. Mary shot Sherlock and Mycroft did nothing. Sherlock must have wondered why, just like I did. When we meet Eustace, we get more potential hints that Sherlock really does not like how Mary treats John.
She's an hysteric, prone to fancies.
No.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said no, she's not an hysteric. She's a highly intelligent woman of rare perception.
Holmes summarizes the case so far for Watson, and they leave with this parting line.
And come, Watson, come. The game is afoot.
Please stop mentioning games. We have come at last to the infamous greenhouse scene, where Sherlock Holmes and John Watson have a conversation about Sherlock's sexual desires while completely encased in glass.
Some things aren't supposed to sit behind glass. They're made to be touched, to be handled.
Watson brings up the subject indirectly, just as John always does, with Lady Carmichael, but it doesn't take long for this conversation to reach more familiar territory.
That watch that you're wearing, there's a photograph inside it. I glimpsed it once. I believe it is of Irene Adler.
Irene Adler comes up every time there's a discussion of Sherlock's heart after Scandal. She's there in the deduction in The Sign of Three, and in the scene where Sherlock is trying not to die, and of course here. So maybe that's part of the question, the ambiguity. Never really knowing who Sherlock loves. But it's always in these same scenes that more emphasis is placed on John and Sherlock's relationship.
God knows where she is. Out of my head. I am busy. You. It's always you. John Watson, you keep me right.
And the woman will cry, and John will cry buckets and buckets. It's him that I worry about the most. That wife. You're letting him down, Sherlock. John Watson is definitely in danger.
Irene Adler.
Formidable opponent, a remarkable adventure.
A very nice photograph.
Why are you talking like this?
Holmes, against absolutely no opposition whatsoever, I am your closest friend.
I conceded.
Or hell, even this.
A damsel in distress. In the end, are you really so obvious? Because this was textbook.
Don't be absurd.
Well, look how you care about John Watson. Your damsel in distress.
At the very least, the two relationships are being compared, and the question is being raised for both of them about who it is that Sherlock loves. Holmes starts going on about how awful emotions are, something we've seen Sherlock do to John before.
Interesting, yes. Emotions. Grit on the lens, the fly in the ointment.
But this Watson knows better.
If you are referring to romantic entanglement, Watson, which I rather fear you are, as I have often explained before, all emotion is abhorrent to me. It is the grit in a sensitive instrument, the crack in the lens.
Yes.
There you are. You see, I've said it all before.
No, I wrote all that. You're quoting yourself from the Strand magazine.
Well, if you wanted statements about what Holmes fans have been getting wrong, look no further.
That is the version of you that I present to the public. The brain without a heart. The calculating machine. I write all of that, Holmes, and the readers lap it up, but I do not believe it.
And the idea here isn't just that Sherlock has a heart, but that he has desires. Desires that Watson is desperate to know about.
You're a living, breathing man. You've lived a life. You have a past. Damn it, Holmes, you are flesh and blood. You have feelings. You must have impulses.
Which is a lot. The ghost shows up at this point, interrupting the conversation, and Sir Eustace is murdered after all.
You promised to keep him safe. You promised.
Sherlock seems to know who did it, though, that there's only one possible suspect.
There is only one suspect with motive and opportunity. They might as well have left a note.
They did leave a note.
Until Moriarty intrudes once again.
He's trying to distract me, to derail me.
Yes, he's the crack in the lens, the fly in the ointment, the virus in the data.
I love this line. The idea of Moriarty as a corrupting force in the very code of the story. Peak meta potential there. But of course, that's not the biggest reveal in this conversation.
Moriarty's dead.
And yet...
his body was never recovered.
Moriarty's body was never recovered? That is extremely suspicious. Good information to have. It would be a shame if this detail was just included and then never went anywhere. I mean, everyone knows that leaving that kind of opening is telling in and of itself, right?
Doyle did declare, repeatedly, that he had killed off Holmes definitively, and there was no chance of bringing him back. I don't believe a word he says, because he kills him off stage. He doesn't have Holmes dying in Watson's arms, as he surely must. He doesn't do any of that. He knows what it means when the body isn't recovered from a body of water where it would float. so he knew perfectly well that he was leaving the door open to Sherlock Holmes' return. But he wanted to do other things for a while, and everyone takes him at face value on this, despite the fact that he is a professional liar, or, as we know them, writers.
Yeah, exactly. Shortly thereafter, we see Moriarty as Sherlock imagines him. And if you thought his behavior to Sherlock had sexual overtones before...
I like your rooms. They smell. So... manly.
I'm sure you acquainted yourself with them before now.
By the way, you have a surprisingly comfortable bed.
If this episode is revealing the way Sherlock perceives things, this scene seems to prove that all of the times it seemed like Moriarty might have been flirting with Sherlock were, in fact, him flirting with Sherlock, and Sherlock is aware of that. And the additional details we get here, things like Moriarty having been in Sherlock's bed while he was gone, take the entire situation up a couple of notches. We're clearly dealing with an obsessed stalker here, right? That might be part of why Sherlock wants so badly for him to be genuinely dead. This is terrifying. But then we get the pinnacle of homoerotic imagery on BBC Sherlock.
It's on the tip of my tongue. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's on the tip.
Dead.
It's the new sexy.
This is one of the scenes that would give me nightmares back when I had convinced myself I was crazy to read the show through a queer lens, because I have no idea how you make sense of it outside of a queer reading. I don't think you can. This is perhaps the most blatantly gay moment on Sherlock, but the implications it has for the surrounding plot elements, Moriarty and Sherlock, and even Irene, who Moriarty is quoting here, yeah, I'm not surprised we were all so confident after this episode came out. Moriarty shoots himself again, and we get to see what the real problem is here.
Why aren't you dead?
Because it's not the fall that kills you, Sherlock. Of all people, you should know that. It's not the fall. It's never the fall. It's the landing.
Sherlock needs Moriarty to be dead, but there's something unfinished here, and Sherlock knows it. Something to do with a landing, which transitions right back to Sherlock actually landing on the plane.
We've landed, sir. We've landed.
No.
Like I mentioned back in A Scandal in Belgravia, I have some thoughts about planes and landings in light of the final problem, but we're going to leave that be for the time. Instead, let's focus on everyone's reactions to Sherlock's drug use. John is terrified.
For God's sake, this could kill you. You could die.
Mary seems notably unbothered, and seems more interested in mocking Mycroft's lack of security.
He was high before he got on the plane.
Didn't seem high.
What do you think of MI5 security?
I think it would be a good idea.
And Mycroft is resigned and takes full responsibility.
Oh, Sherlock. You really think anyone's believing you? This was my fault.
As always, I find Mycroft's guilt fascinating. But shortly thereafter, Sherlock falls back into his dream, clearly interpreting John's reaction as anger and disappointment.
Listen, I'm happy to play the fool for you. I will run along behind you like some half-wit, making you look clever if that's what you need. But dear God above, you will hold yourself to a higher standard.
They find Mary at a desanctified church, and we more or less get confirmation that Sherlock assumes Mary is working for Mycroft at this point.
You're working for Mycroft?
He likes to keep an eye on his mad sibling.
We had a spy to hand.
And also that Sherlock might be starting to doubt his earlier certainty that John is going to leave her.
I thought I was losing you. I thought perhaps we were neglecting each other.
Well, you're the one who moved out.
I was talking to Mary.
Sherlock rushes in and provides his explanation of the case, which notably includes the detail that Amelia did, in fact, fake her death using the same method Moriarty used to kill himself.
She places one of the revolvers in her mouth while actually firing the other into the ground. An accomplice sprays the curtains with blood, and thus her apparent suicide is witnessed by the frightened crowd below.
So, someone could fake their death in that scenario, is what I'm getting out of this. Then Sherlock starts waxing poetic about these disregarded women.
Ignored, patronized, disregarded, but an army nonetheless. Ready to rise up in the best of causes. To put right an injustice as old as humanity itself. So you see, Watson, Mycroft was right. This is a war we must lose.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that with as heavy-handed as this dialogue is, I don't think we were pulling the potential for a deeper meaning here out of nowhere. This reads like the writer's saying something. Now, maybe it's just a statement on the misogyny of the Victorian era, and it isn't quite landing. Or maybe...
The women we have lied to, betrayed. The women we have ignored and disparaged.
This is the heart of it all, John. The heart of the conspiracy.
Maybe it was a bit more specific. Not that all of TJLC was ever entirely women. There's always been a sizable chunk of non-binary people and trans men. Maybe we even have a couple cis dudes. I haven't seen them, but they might be there. But I could see how they got that impression from the outside. But that is obviously speculation. My point is that this reading did not come out of nowhere.
Once the idea exists, it cannot be killed.
But I do want you to remember this conversation about these brides. We will be coming back to them in a later video. Back to Sherlock's deduction, he still clearly thinks there's only one possible culprit.
This is the work of a single-minded person. Someone who knew firsthand about Sir Eustace's mental cruelty. If one disregards the ghost, there is only one suspect. Isn't that right, Lady Carmichael?
Which, if you're paying attention to the mirror characters, means he thinks John is orchestrating Moriarty's return to get revenge on Mary. But he quickly tells himself that that doesn't add up, because if John were behind it, he would have no reason to call Sherlock back.
One small detail doesn't quite make sense to me, however. Why engage me to prevent a murder you intended to commit?
Which is heartbreaking. And who shows up in that moment but the specter Sherlock fears most?
It doesn't quite make sense. Doesn't quite make sense.
Of course it doesn't make sense. It's not real.
Oh, Sherlock. Peekaboo.
You might notice that this scene bears some striking similarities to the villain Mary reveal.
Additionally, if you're going to commit murder, you might consider changing your perfume, Lady Smallwood. Isn't that right, Lady Carmichael?
That's not Lady Smallwood, Mr. Holmes.
Peekaboo.
And in addition to Moriarty wearing a wedding dress, we also get Mary and Moriarty saying the same lines.
You're dreaming.
Is he dreaming?
So again, if you're paying attention to the subtext, it seems that at this point, Sherlock shifts to a new theory, that it's Mary behind it after all, that she's more powerful than Mycroft.
That would take weeks to find if those records even exist, even with my resources.
Got it. That she's going to successfully take John away from him.
John, please.
I'm not playing this time, Sherlock. Not anymore. When you're ready to go to work, give me a call. I'm taking Mary home.
You're what?
Mary's taking me home.
Better.
Sherlock seems convinced that John would be justified to leave him.
He's right, you know?
So what if he's right? He's always right. It's boring.
And yet, he can't leave. He's obsessed with this Ricoletti case, a name which, of course, traces back to the time of Sherlock's own fall.
Peter Ricoletti, #1 on Interpol's most wanted list since 1982.
He needs to be sure Moriarty is really dead, that everything he did, from faking his death to being tortured in Serbia, wasn't for nothing. He digs and can't find what he's looking for, and gets dragged to his own personal hell by the ghost.
Oh, I see. Still not awake, am I?
Moriarty is back and again refers to himself as a corrupting force acting on the story, acting on Sherlock.
You once called your brain a hard drive. Well, say hello to the virus.
If Moriarty filleting a gun is the most blatantly queer moment on Sherlock, this scene has the most blatant statements of a potential thematic message. Again, straight from Moriarty's mouth.
This is how we end, you and I. Always here. Always together.
This is the first explicit reference to the fact that this is a story we all already know, a story we've all been told before, over and over and over again. But it always ends the same way, because of Moriarty.
Don't try to fight it! Lie back and lose! Shall we go over together? It has to be together, doesn't it? At the end, it's always just you and me!
And that's all true. This story has been understood and retold in the same way for as long as these characters have been around, but not this time.
Professor, if you wouldn't mind stepping away from my friend, I do believe he finds your attention a shade annoying.
In fact, Watson implies that this is the true story, the one that has been there since the beginning.
That's not fair, there's two of you.
There's always two of us. Don't you read the Strand?
So...
This comes from a place of us being fans. This wasn't a case of, let's grab that off the shelf and update it. It was, we love this, we think everybody's been getting it wrong, and we think we can get it right. Unless you think you're correcting everyone else, you shouldn't be doing something. You should be saying, now this is the way it should be done.
Yeah, I think that just came through loud and clear, Steven. Thanks! Something about the way this story has been told has been wrong all along. Holmes fans have been missing the point since the stories were coming out in the Strand. The point? Holmes and Watson's relationship. Except, should I even be calling them Holmes and Watson?
Thank you, John.
Since when do you call me John?
You'd be surprised.
No, I wouldn't. Time you woke up, Sherlock.
Even in the Victorian era, apparently they were calling each other Sherlock and John. This is followed up with even more blatant flirting.
So what's he like? The other me, in the other place.
Smarter than he looks.
Pretty damn smart, then.
Pretty damn smart.
Which Moriarty comments on, and we get the most rapid-fire series of contradictions I think this show has ever pulled.
Ugh, why don't you two just elope, for God's sake?
Impertinent.
Offensive.
Actually, would you mind?
Not at all.
If you wanted to read this as the show saying that their intent is to do things differently by having Sherlock and John end up together, I don't think you're getting that out of nowhere. At the very least, the implication is still being left on the table as part of what sets this version apart. This ambiguity, acknowledgement, intention surrounding Sherlock and John's relationship is what's going to change the ending. And of course, having John be the one to push Moriarty over definitively states that he's central to this story.
It was my turn.
Good, sir.
And with Moriarty taken care of, Sherlock is no longer afraid to wake up. In fact, because of this, he seems rather ecstatic to get back.
Miss me?
Sherlock leads John and Mary away, leaving a guilt-ridden Mycroft alone on his plane, looking at his notebook. As they walk away, Sherlock drops this bombshell.
Of course he's dead. He blew his own brains out. No one survives that. I just went to the trouble of an overdose to prove it.
Couple of small problems there. He took the drugs before he got on the plane, so no, that's not why he was overdosing. But the much bigger issue here is that at no point did Sherlock prove Moriarty is dead. Not only was that not the primary focus of his dream, the closest he got to proving anything was when he said Amelia appeared to shoot herself in the mouth, but actually didn't. And Moriarty's body was never recovered. I buy Sherlock believing Moriarty is dead. He's clearly terrified of him, but it feels like we got to see his thought process so that we could see that he's incorrectly connecting some of these dots here. And the episode ends with my favorite moment on Sherlock. One final Victorian scene where Holmes and Watson discuss BBC Sherlock as if it's a story Holmes has been telling Watson.
Flying machines, these telephone contraptions? What sort of lunatic fantasy is that?
It was simply my conjecture of what a future world might look like and how you and I might fit inside it. From a drop of water, a logician should be able to infer the possibility of an Atlantic or a Niagara.
Holmes seems desperate for that world.
Perhaps I was being a little fanciful, but perhaps such things could come to pass.
He feels that he and Watson don't quite fit in the Victorian era.
In any case, I know I would be very much at home in such a world.
Don't think I would be.
I beg to differ. But then I've always known I was a man out of his time.
I still hold that if this scene is about iPhones, that's pretty disappointing. And if it's about yearning for a future where Holmes and Watson can finally openly be together, this scene is beautiful and profound. Which is it? As I make this retrospective, I'm sort of imagining it like I'm piloting a plane with all of you inside, taking you safely through the sky, providing a guided bird's-eye view of BBC Sherlock, and avoiding as much turbulence as possible. Right now, I'm landing the plane and offering you the chance to get off. The journey isn't over. We have a long way to go before we've made it home, but I imagine this is where many of you will want to leave, because our next destination is Series 4. And I know not all of you will want to revisit that yet. or ever. If that's you, I don't want to leave you hanging, feeling like you're getting an incomplete experience. So let's summarize what we've covered and try to give you the context you need so that you can step away with this feeling at least a little resolved. I've had the chance to talk to dozens of former and current members of the TJLC community, and what I've heard almost across the board from those who took some time away is that when they finally revisited the show, they liked it more than they thought they would, and that there was more evidence for the way we saw things than they expected to find. I hope that if you've been hesitant to return to the show yourself, this retrospective on the first 10 episodes has eased you back into that experience. The subtext was there. You weren't crazy. And the story as we saw it had a lot of potential. You might have noticed that the lengths of each episode have been steadily increasing as we've gone on. And that's mostly because as the show progresses, there are more and more blatant moments to address. Taking these first 10 in isolation, you have a story that starts by asking questions about who Sherlock and John are, what their relationship to each other really is, and explores those questions from every angle. As those questions keep coming up, more answers are discarded, and it begins to look like this show is headed towards one definitive answer. The answer? This show, and not just this show, but the home stories themselves, are and always were a love story between Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. The moments of confirmation get more frequent and more blatant until the last 10 minutes of The Abominable Bride appear to shout, for all the world to hear, we're doing this. Get ready. And yet, we all know that's not how the story goes. So, why? Well, I've already said I can't really give you a definitive answer. I don't know. And without going on to look at Series 4, I'm even more limited on what kind of closure I can offer. Here's what I can say. I have been harping on those questions, the 3 mysteries that are really one. But there's a bigger question, one that is the subtext of this entire retrospective. You already know it. You've been asking it yourself. What did these writers mean? Or even beyond that, did they mean anything? Was BBC Sherlock made for a purpose, to say that everyone else had been getting it wrong and argue that point using its story? Or is it a series of ideas and questions the writers found interesting without any broader overarching intent or plan tying them together? Series 4 answers that question resoundingly with the latter answer. Every plotline with potential, Moriarty and Mycroft and Mary as Moran, brushed aside entirely apart from a few references that seem like little digs about the story they've left behind. Sherlock's character? He actually makes it more or less intact. It's only his backstory that gets the horror treatment. Secret sisters and even more secret dead childhood best friends. Those were the things that shaped him into the man he is. John's character, everything the show has ever said about John being important to the story, about him being a good man, goes out the window. John isn't as talented as Mary. He cheats. He hurts those closest to him in anger. And at the end, he's more or less completely useless. Sherlock and John's relationship? The two barely speak. The center point of Series 4 of BBC Sherlock? Mary Watson. How good and clever and essential she is to the story, to John and Sherlock's relationship. How without her, it all falls apart. And the idea that this show is about who Sherlock and John are as people? Of course it's not. Who they are doesn't matter. It's all about the legend, the stories, the adventures. That's what it's always been about. To say that Series 4 is incompatible with where things were headed in The Abominable Bride, incompatible with what the writers themselves have said they hope to do with the show, would be a massive understatement. It's the kind of nonsensical contradiction that makes the entire story fall apart. Is it any wonder that people looked at that and thought that what they had loved never existed to begin with? But it wasn't just those questions that seemed to be making up the fabric of this story, was it? There are 2 other elements that I have referenced throughout this retrospective to lead to this moment, where I'm going to try to convince you to keep watching after this point, even if you don't think you're ready. If you still end your journey here, I understand, but at least hear my sales pitch. What were the 2 techniques that went hand in hand with all those thematic questions? Heightening the absurdity of certain readings to the point of parody, literary criticism by means of satire, if you will, and misleading the audience through the use of contradictory statements. Making it feel like you really had to pay attention if you wanted to understand what was going on, if you really wanted to know what you were meant to believe. That ultimately, in order to understand BBC Sherlock, you had to play the game. So you have a story, seemingly locked in one clear direction. There's only one place things can sensibly go after the ending of The Abominable Bride, right? Everything has been building and building and leading to that one overwhelming conclusion more and more blatantly. But what has always been the follow-up to that sort of certainty? Yanking the audience hard in the complete opposite direction. Likewise, what does ending a story that was consistently about who Sherlock and John are as people with the statement, oh, that doesn't matter, it's just about the adventures, always was, and making it seem like the center point of this story is Mary Watson rather than Sherlock and John, read as if not a pointed form of satire. In other words, what if Series 4 goes against everything the show had set up on purpose? That's a hard thought to consider for so many reasons. The next video, the recap of Series 4, will not be about that question, because I know Series 4 left many of us with some wounds we have never really allowed to properly heal. Before you can even get close to analyzing Series 4, you have to come to terms with it as it is. See it not as some frightening monster that can't be thought of, but at worst, the writers losing the thread of what made their show great. Even in that case, I don't think Series 4 takes away from the story we loved. It was still there. You don't have to go beyond that to find closure. In some ways, it doesn't matter what came next, what still might be to come. If the story presented in these first 10 episodes is a story you love, and you feel like you need permission to do that in spite of what the writers might have intended, this is me giving it to you. If all the potential that was there was just that, unrealized potential, you can still love that version of the story. The story belongs to you just as much as it belongs to them. However, I don't want to leave you with just that. And so, if you enjoy the story through the lens presented here and wonder how things might have gone in a different world, one where insane wish fulfillment was actually our version of it, I have a story for you. From a Drop of Water is a version of Series 4 that follows up on all the little threads I've been bringing up here and takes them to what, in my mind, is their logical conclusion. I can't promise the story will be everything you personally wanted, but I did work very hard on it. I'm proud of how it turned out, and the reception so far has been very positive. I think the story achieved what I set out to accomplish with it, finishing the story the way I think it ought to have gone. There's a link to where you can read From a Drop of Water in the description. I've framed a lot of my discussion here with the idea that storytelling can be a form of argument. And while that idea does feature prominently in some Series 4 meta that we'll be talking about later, link to that below, it was actually my experience writing From a Drop of Water that gave me that idea, because that's how I approached writing it. My best argument for a TJLC reading isn't this project. It's not even TJLC Explained. It's the ending I created using the pieces that were already provided by the show, and where I demonstrated, one scene at a time, that bringing those pieces together to lead to the reveal that Sherlock and John were in love was a better story than the one we've gotten. The romance was there. We did not alter the facts, and all of those drops of water could have led to a waterfall. And so if you want to leave it here, having reclaimed the story you loved for yourself, or at the very, very least, hopefully feeling less shame about seeing and loving that story 5 years ago, go with my blessing. I hope you enjoy my version of Series 4 if you decide to read it. In full disclosure, I think that's the route I would have taken if I didn't feel an obligation to try to work through all of this for the sake of my audience. But I can also honestly say that I am glad I pushed on. I feel much happier and healthier for it. And I'll tell you that that isn't coming from a belief that Series 5 is going to come out and fix everything. I don't actually think that. Even in a best case scenario, what happened for many of us can't be fixed with a love confession or even an apology. Even if you go forward, you don't need to believe TJLC is correct to find peace. In fact, I think it's crucial that you find peace before you seriously engage with that idea again. I always come back to a quote my dear friend Lyd and I send to each other. What happened wasn't okay, but it is okay to think about it. And being able to think about Series 4 without panicking feels like a gift after so many years. And it's one I'd like to share with you. So I hope you'll join me for that. Take as much time as you need, but I would encourage you not to let your bad memories keep you from working through the rest of this. It is possible, and it will probably even be easier than you were afraid it would be. For those disembarking, I thank you for your time. Please gather your belongings and calmly exit through the doors located near the pilot's cabin. I'll see you on your way out. For the passengers who will be remaining on board for the next leg of our journey, thank you for flying with us. Please be sure to safely secure your baggage either in the overhead compartment or below your feet. And prepare yourself for a bit of turbulence. Don't worry, we're in for some clear, sunny skies when we make it through to the other side.